You're listening to audio from University Baptist Church in Beaver Creek, Ohio. Our mission is to make wholehearted followers of Jesus Christ who know him and make him known. Please enjoy this podcast and visit us at ubcbeavercreek.com for more information. Welcome to UBC Talking Points. Our purpose is to make wholehearted followers of Jesus Christ who know him and make him known through ministry and theological conversations. This is another episode of the subseries Stories from the Field, where we hear from and highlight our local and global missions. Today's Stories from the Field episode will highlight our recent trip to Uganda to serve in the South Sudanese refugee camps. So I am your host, Jen Hart, and let's introduce who else we have here with us today from the team.
My name is Owen. I've been super blessed to be able to work a lot in the youth group with UBC, going on a couple missions trips with them. But this was my first missions trip with E3 Ministries, and it was a pretty amazing experience.
I'm Jim. I was on staff here at UBC, still on staff here, I guess, at UBC, and been going to Uganda since 2017 with E3 Ministry as well.
My name is Sandy. I am Jim's wife, and I have been blessed to be able to join him on all the trips to Uganda and several others in addition, and was blessed to be able to go on this trip with the people that are joining us in this podcast today.
My name is Hudson. I am very grateful to have loving family members who have led me to the Lord, and I would be very happy to be able to do what they're doing and follow in their steps of ministry. And the first step of that was going to Uganda.
Well, we are glad to have our team here. We had 8 total that were able to go on the trip to Uganda, and I actually had the privilege of being part of that Uganda team. And so we'll be talking about our experiences, but know that there are some others that were able to be part of that ministry with us that aren't necessarily part of our UBC family that we're here today for our podcast. So a little bit of background, a little geography lesson for Uganda and where that area is that's helpful for us to know. Uganda is known as the Pearl of Africa, and it's located in East Africa. It's landlocked. It borders Kenya and Tanzania and Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo and South Sudan. And the country gained their independence from British rule in 1962. So while there's many languages spoken among the different tribes within the country, the national language is English. Uganda is known for its hospitality and welcoming people. In fact, they greet you with the phrase, "You're welcome," most places that you enter or go to. Some geographical features of note in Uganda are Lake Victoria, which is the source of the Nile River. And they have a lot of diverse ecosystems and wildlife within the country that bring in tourists. Their economy is primarily agricultural. They are exporters of coffee and cotton and tea. And another fact about Uganda is that 41% of the people there live in poverty, and almost half of Uganda's population is under the age of 15, representing one of the youngest populations in the world. So Uganda also hosts the largest refugee population in Africa, with more than 1.5 million refugees that have fled their home countries to seek asylum within Uganda. So part of this trip's ministry was to be able to work with some of those refugees who have found Uganda as their home because of conflict within the nations which they've had to flee. So this trip was done in partnership with Cedarville University's Global Outreach team, and as well as E3 partners. Owen, you mentioned that. We partnered with Cedarville for this trip as a way to offer another on-ramp for short-term missions for college students that we serve in our church family. Global Outreach at Cedarville partners with local churches and ministries to mobilize students on domestic and international trips while they're in their college experience studying in their field of interest and just exploring how God may have them live on mission after graduation. We did have a Cedarville student join our team this summer that lived in Uganda for 15 months after she graduated from high school, and she was a wonderful asset to our team. She was a humble servant and gifted in languages. As soon as her feet hit that soil, she was as much Ugandan as she was American, and so she was a wonderful asset to our team. Jim, can you tell us a little bit more about E3 and the mission partners in Uganda and their strategic vision for reaching those in the refugee camps?
Yes. So E3 Partners is an organization that's headquartered here in the U.S. in Plano, Texas. And basically what we do there is to equip the church to go evangelize and then establish churches. And so they're primarily church planting and discipleship making. And what we'll try to do when we go in on a short-term trip is partner with local indigenous pastors that are looking to church plant. And with the refugees in Uganda, you have a lot of movement back and forth. So we primarily then have found Ugandan pastors who have a heart for the refugees as well. And so we've been partnering with Duncan since 2019 is when we met Duncan. And so we've been partnering him now for the 6 or 7 years in going into the camps to help him with his strategy. So it's not our strategy. It's going to be what Duncan's strategy is to help reach the refugees and working with pastors within the various camps.
Can you give our listeners a little bit of an overview of some ways that the team was able to serve during the trip to advance Duncan's vision and the vision of E3 in that region?
Yeah. So normally Duncan will find some pastors that he's looking to work with, and it's going to be pastors that have the same doctrinal background, right? So we want to make sure that we're partnering with churches and partnering with pastors that agree with the gospel, the true gospel. And so Duncan is trying to work with them and to open up various aspects of the camp where we can plant further. So what we come in as a team is, and again, it's someone has called it as we're the fish on the end of the fishing hook at times, because we're going to be a little bit different than most Ugandans look. And so we're going out there and we have the opportunity to break the ice sometimes so that way a conversation can start. And so we want to train the local church members so that when we leave, they're going to be able to continue discipling.
So why Uganda? I know for some of you, this was a return trip. You've been there many times. For some, this might have been your first missions trip like this. What was the most compelling reason to get involved in this particular country, in this particular work, in this part of the world?
Well, my parents went 2 years ago, and when they got back, they described this brilliant opportunity to share the love of Jesus with people halfway across the world. And I wanted that, like, it was almost like a desire of mine. But as the years passed, they were not able to go last year. But this year, the opportunity came, and I was old enough to go, and I had been growing in my faith. So I just felt like, why not go when it's a opportunity that there's no reason to pass up.
What was it for you, Sandy, that brought you back?
For Uganda, it was truly God working. I always had a heart for Africa. I had been to 2 other countries in Africa, and then the Lord clearly pulled us away from Africa to the Amazon area in Peru, and I served there faithfully as the Lord called each year, but my heart was still in Africa and didn't know how I was going to get back. And I'm going to say randomly, I'm saying that tongue in cheek because the Lord was behind it, but Jim was at a conference and he came home all excited and said he met this woman who works with South Sudanese refugees in Uganda, and she would like us to bring a team there. And so Uganda had never really been on my radar, but it was in Africa. And so I was like, oh, that's amazing. Yes, we can really talk to her and see what's involved. And God in his graciousness, just a little bit of the history, when we agreed to do this trip, it was going to be in the refugee camps, and we were going to camp in the refugee camps. And that was way outside my comfort zone. And I was like, Lord, I want to get back to Africa, but not really to camp in the camps in a tent. And like, I want a hotel and a bed. But I could hear the Lord saying, you want to go to Africa, and here's this opportunity. You have to trust me. And so I trusted the Lord and said yes and told Jim, let's get this trip going. And he does all the strategy stuff for it. And God in his goodness and his mercy, after probably about 4 or 6 weeks of time of saying we were going, we were notified that we could not stay in the camps for logistical reasons, and I would have to stay away from the camps in a Ugandan hotel. So from my obedience, God met my needs, and Uganda's become part of my heart now, and we have family there.
I was going to say, met the heart need there is like, so Duncan for us, he's like a son. So, you God's family as we get together. So every time we see Duncan, it's like a family reunion. But as Sandy mentioned, it was like we started working with refugees here in the Dayton area. So we were working with the refugees, and then, as Sandy mentioned, it just happened to have a chance meeting with an individual at a conference that wasn't really supposed to be about refugees. And then from that, it's just opened up the door.
How about you, Owen?
For me, it's pretty much the same as Hudson, with two parents going a couple years ago and just bringing back a desire for us to come back with them. I knew that the Bible commands us to go into all the world to make disciples. And so this was where the Lord called me.
I know the boys have mentioned Owen and Hudson are my sons, and so it was a real delight to be able to return to Uganda with them this year. I know on our first trip to Uganda 2 years ago, Sandy had mentioned that she had Africa in her heart, but not necessarily the particular country that she was drawn to. For me, when people would make that joke of, I don't want to get called to missions because I'm afraid God will send me to Africa. Even back in my teen years, I thought, man, if God calls me to missions, I want him to call me to Africa. So I'd always had this desire to be able to go there. And then through the ministry of Katie Davis Majors had read a lot about the people in Uganda and the work that she was doing there. And so God gave me a burden for that particular place that I wanted to be able to visit. Worked with a teacher who took trips there on her summer breaks as well that kind of made me aware of needs within that country. So when we arrived at UBC 3 years ago and we heard the mission interest meeting and saw that Uganda was on the list, I looked at my husband, Glenn, and he has always had a heart for church planting. And this was a church planting trip in Uganda. And it clicked together of, let's go, let's do it. And so we stepped out in obedience to the Lord to plan to go on that trip and saw the Lord work in amazing ways in us and through us while we were there, and desired to be able, knowing that there were so many young people in the country, to be able to take our whole family back on another trip, to be able to allow them to experience ministry in that place. So, Owen, Hudson, this was your first trip outside of the U.S. What was it like to experience a different culture and see God at work in a different region of the world?
For me, it was very humbling just to see the poverty that was in the camps and the towns that we drove through. But it was even cooler for me to see that the joy that was in the churches that we were working with, despite that, and also their extreme generosity with us.
How about for you, Hudson?
Well, I feel like sometimes you can see, like, generally America as this, like, brilliant land of opportunity, and it is, and that's what other people see us as. But when you go to a different country, at least Uganda, you could see the people there were just, like, happy and content. And you can see, like, successful people generally, they're missing something. And even though, like, everybody needs Jesus, the Ugandans, they, like, even though they have way less than everyone here, they're still much more content and much more happy. And that was very cool to see.
Success and our comforts that we have can kind of make us ignore some of those spiritual needs here back at home. How about for you, Sandy? Are there things that stand out to you that are out of your comfort zone or that stand out culturally when you're in Uganda?
I'm chuckling because everything is out of my comfort zone of my flesh. The long travel in the airplane, the car travel, not eating my home-cooked meals, all of that is not in my comfort zone. But saying that is, God meets me in that and allows me to do these trips. It's like I have two personalities, or there's two Sandys. There's the spoiled American Sandy who can't imagine not having all her comforts of home. And then there's the African Sandy. And once I get on that plane, the African Sandy, who is the obedient to the Lord and doing what he wants me to do, Sandy, is given everything she needs. And so while it's out of my comfort zone, once I get on the plane, I'm in that zone, and it's all good. God takes care of it.
That sufficient grace comes through.
Amen.
The need of all those opportunities. So, Jim and Sandy, this was your 6th trip to Uganda. What are some ways that you've been able to deepen relationships with the people there as you've returned over the years? You talked about Duncan being like family. I know Bosco, the driver for the team, is another family that is a part of your lives now when you're back home as well. How has that helped make you more effective during the short-term trips there to have the return relationships?
Well, trying to set up the trips for one, having the relationships back, that takes a lot of the burden off, especially with knowing that Bosco knows the roads, he knows how to drive, and we're going to have him as our driver. I don't worry about taking the team around the country. I know Bosco cares for us like we're family. And so it's not like you're getting someone that doesn't have I'll use the phrase, skin in the game, right? He wants to take care of us as if we're his parents for Sandy and I, or, brothers or sisters, or even, younger children. And then same thing with Duncan. I mean, over the course of years, we've watched Duncan grow as a pastor. We've seen him graduate from a seminary. Mm-hmm. And so all those come together where it's not just Duncan, now it's Duncan and Sarah, his wife. And so, with Bosco, we know with Janet, right? So you just continue to grow. And like this, mentioned Alex. So this trip has been the 3rd year we've been with Alex as well. And so we see that growing along the way as well, right? You're there for 2 weeks, you get to know each other, and you bond as you're going out there.
And what's cool I complain about modern technology and I don't like it, but the blessing of the modern technology is, and this is amazing, I still find it amazing, that people that are out in the refugee camps, or even as Ugandans who are poor and living in the poverty and the percentage that you talked about, do have cell phones. Now, their plans aren't like ours, and they have limited minutes and things, but we are able to keep regular contact with these people in day-to-day and prayer needs and what's going on in their lives, and send pictures back. And like, they know our family now and know our grandchildren. And I get pictures of Bosco's little kids playing and wrestling on the floor. And so while we're gone, there's that ability now to continue to connect with them, and also to hear ministry updates almost firsthand, very quickly as things are transpiring because of modern technology. So that keeps our relationship growing and going, and it's not just like a 2 weeks a year relationship.
What a beautiful thing that you're able to keep your finger on the heartbeat of what God is doing in the kingdom building around the world, not just here in our little corner in the Dayton area as well. So I've noticed some age diversity of our team members looking around. And this is an audio podcast, so you're not getting to see what I see. But we've got middle school all the way to retirement sitting in this room. I'd love to hear a little bit about how some different members on the team were able to serve. So Hudson, you were the youngest member on the trip. Did you just sit back and watch the whole time you were there?
I was a little worried the first couple days of travel, and just getting adjusted and stuff. But as time went on, I listened to conversations had about other people's experiences in the refugee camps, and I had gone through the training with the tools that we needed to train the members of the churches we went to. So the first day we actually went to a refugee camp, I was able to contribute and train, and then go out on my own with the translator and the other members of the church to complete the training process and also spread the gospel around the camps.
Mm-hmm. So definitely not just a passive team member on the team.
For me, it was definitely an intimidating thought that like I was supposed to get up in front of this whole church of people who most of them didn't even speak my language. Like I knew I wasn't qualified on my own to do something like that. I had no experience of any kind doing stuff like that. And so it was definitely a little nerve-wracking when Jim told me on our first day in the church that I was going to get up there and teach this tool. But I got up there and I did it. And the Lord definitely gave me the ability to go out of my comfort zone in that way. And as the trip went on, it got easier and easier, and it was definitely fruitful.
Yeah. Don't short yourself when you're a master trainer, right? You and Hudson are both master trainers now.
I think one of the days when we were in one of the camps, we had 4 young adults, 21 and younger, on our team, and then 4 of us that were above that age range. And one of the days, it was the 21 and younger that did all of the training that day for the church group. And so it's cool to be able to step back and see that the young people aren't just the church of tomorrow, they're the church of today. Yeah. And in a church filled with young people, in the camps in the refugee areas that we were as well, I think it was a great example for the young people there to know that they are hands and feet that can serve in multiplying the ministries there right now, not later when they get older too.
And I think with the spirit of that, you saw that church when we were in Uganda, both camps, because we did that, right? 3 camps. But you could see the church as a whole, they didn't see an age. They didn't see the age, right? They just saw people that loved Jesus, helping them learn tools that they would do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in our second site in Aurora, my 2 of the team members that went out with me each day were 13, 14-year-olds. And so, but they were encouraged because the training was our young adults here from UBC, and they felt, well, they can do it, so can we. And the one day, in fact, there was a large group of kids that were in the training in the back, and our young men on the team went back and personally worked with them to make sure that they were grasping all the tools. So these young people, even from the camp that were with me, they were getting down and doing the training with the people in their community because they had just been trained by this young team of all under 21. And so it was just really cool to see that multi-generational sharing of the gospel and church planners being actually live in the camp itself.
Mm-hmm. I think that day in training, that as we were getting ready to go out in our smaller groups into the community to share, Jim had given out the challenge to the young church in the back corner. I think there was around 30 of them that were back there. Go out and get a couple friends. Yep. And there was a young man that caught up with the group that I was out with later that afternoon who had a couple friends with him. And he got busy sharing the same tools that he had just learned with them. And as we traveled from hut to hut, pretty soon he was the one that was sharing with the children in each of those areas and others, and just was really taking ownership of it. So that was neat to see.
Yeah, I mean, as we're all talking about it, it's, we're all followers of Jesus, and regardless of the age, and we laughed about that, right? The church in the back. I mean, that was a church plant in the back. Mm-hmm. And so Hudson had his own church. I'll start calling you Pastor Hudson, maybe.
There we go. Well, a little bit of the logistics of the trip. I know we've shared that we were able to go into the refugee camps. So in the country of Uganda, there are many refugees. Many along the northern border of the country come from South Sudan and that area. It's an area that's been in conflict for a long time. And so as we were in the camps, we were in a couple of different areas where we were able to spend 4 days working with the churches there. So, Sandy, can you tell us a little bit about the area that you were in, Ajumani, and a little bit about that church community?
Yeah, in Ajumani, the church community that I was at, and Hudson was there with me also, and then other team members that aren't part of this podcast. But this church was not a church of refugees. It was a Ugandan church who was right across the street from the camp. We always think of the camps as being like behind chain link fences and you can't access, but it's really just crossing a dirt road. And one side is Ugandans, national Ugandans, and the other side for a period of miles is the refugee camp. And so this church has a heart for the refugees. And so they were wanting to partner with our team to receive the tools so that they can continue to go out and meet the spiritual needs of these refugees. They realize that the physical needs of the refugees are something beyond their ability to really put a dent in, but they knew that their spiritual needs were something that they could really put a dent in. And so they intentionally wanted to get trained, and they were trained. And it was just a different sight for me, because normally we're with the church that's in the camp, and this was an intentional non-camp church who has a heart for the refugees.
And you were in the settlement of Numanzi. I know one of the things that we talked about with South Sudan is that they've had unrest and conflict and war between the different tribes and groups within that country. And a lot of the people in this church community that you partnered with were from a Mahdi background. And historically in South Sudan, the Mahdi and the Dinka don't get along well. And yet the people, their neighbors that were around them, were many of the Dinka people that they had a heart to be able to reach. So that's just such a beautiful picture of the way that the gospel can bring that God of peace and reconciliation to groups of people who haven't had anything in common with each other over the years as well. So our team split into two when we were in the area of Ajimani. So the group that you led were in the settlement in Numanzi. Tell us about the other camp that we were in that area, Jim.
Pagrinya. Again, we were initially we thought we were outside the camp also, but what we figured out was the church was the only thing. It was like in the middle of the camp. And so, and it had refugees were the members of the church, but it was huge. We only went to like 2 really, but there was 3 of the blocks that we were trying to get into, but we really only got into 2 of the blocks. And in these blocks, you're talking 12 to 15,000 refugees in huts. But I'm not sure. I don't know if we ever talked about what you guys did at your thing, but all I can say is our church liked to dance and worship and sing.
Yes, they did.
And so I think Owen had a good time with the dancing there as well. But yeah, you could see them worshiping the Lord, and then they had a desire to go out. And so I think we had 50 to 75 people every day. And like we were in, I think it was F and D were the 2 primary things. We had people walking over an hour to come to the training because they wanted to take it back to Block A and Block C. That's what, to me, was when we figured that out on day 2. That's kind of amazing.
They were up early and walked a long way, and most always beat us to the camp by the time our bus was able to get there. Midway through our time there, they realized that our bus went the direction of their walk. And so they waved us down, and we had some extra space on our bus. And I think we were able to squeeze 22, 23 of the people who had walked that long way from Block A. And the moment that door closed on the bus and they were all squeezed in, they broke into song and music, and boy, we were gathering plenty of stairs as we bumped down the road, and then we're able to drop them off so they didn't have quite as long of a walk on their way back as we drove back to pick up the remainder of our team too. So first part of our trip, we were near Ajimani, that area, and the settlements of the camps there. And then the second part of our trip, we were in Arua, that area. Tell us a little bit about Ofua, that camp, and the work that was done there, Jim.
So Afua is part of what they call the Rhino camps, which are on the northwest part of the country. And that's where Sandy and I first went in 2017, was into Afua, and they have 6 parts. And so we were in Afua 5 this time. And I think we had quite a few languages. So we stayed together as one group, and there was at least 3 or 4 languages that were primary in that part of the camp. But Sandy and I have been through, I think this was the last of the Fua settlements that we've been in. But I don't know if I forget, part of the ones that we've seen in other camps and other of our trips out there actually remembered. I mean, they remember the year that you were there 2 years ago. And so we were able to see members from that camp come over to help us this time as well.
It's exciting to see them continuing on in their area, but then having a heart for growing it in those new places that we were as well. So lots of work. There was a little bit of play that we got to have on our drive back down towards the capital at the end of our time in the camps. Was a safari day, but I think this is a great time to take a break. And when we come back, I want to hear some of those safari stories. We'll be right back. Hey, UBC. If you're listening to this podcast and you're interested in learning more about our missions ministry, you can head to www.ubcbeavercreek.com/mission ministry. There you can learn about UBC's mission ministries, upcoming local, national, and international mission trips, and find our monthly updates to catch the excitement about what God is doing here and around the world. That's www.ubcbeavercreek.com/mission ministry. Find the link in the podcast notes. Welcome back. We are excited to hear some of the specific stories of things that you were able to experience during your time in Uganda. So, Hudson, you had mentioned earlier that adjustment of all of the travel and getting to a new country, you were a little nervous about how that was going to go. What were some risks that you took with food or things like that while you were in Uganda?
Well, one of the days on the rooftop restaurant we were eating at, I ordered goat to see what that would taste like, and it was pretty good. Just tasted like meat with seasoning. So, but yeah, it was interesting. There were some bones in there, and it kind of made me sad whenever I saw the little goats hopping around in the field.
Yeah, but I like the recruiting that you did there. Rooftop restaurant. Hope everybody that's here and that wants to go next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I also got to take out the bones of a fish. I don't know what it was.
Tilapia, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was at this buffet thing. So, yeah. Pretty interesting foods there.
Yeah, they leave the skin, when you get the tilapia, it's looking at you on the plate. And so if you try to eat it with a fork, it's very difficult because there's all those tiny bones in it. But Bosco and Duncan saw me struggling. And often by the time we would eat dinner, it would be getting dark as well. So then you've got you're trying to see the plate as well as figure out what's bones, what's food, what's skin, all of that. So they said, you got to put the fork down. You got to eat it with your fingers so that you can feel the bones. And they were so right. When I would just pick it up with my hands instead, you could feel those bones, get them right out and enjoy the fish that was there. And so that was probably my favorite food experience of the restaurant too.
But for those who are not adventurous eaters, I want to assure you that there's normal food in Uganda, and you can get hamburgers and chicken and French fries and pork.
And pizza.
Pizza. So you don't have to be adventurous like Hudson and Jen and some of our other members are.
No shortage of potatoes there. Owen, what was a favorite thing for you?
I was not nearly as adventurous as Hudson, and I stuck to pork and chicken and beef while I was there. But probably my two favorite things that I ate while I was there was every time I had pork, it was seasoned really well and it tasted really good. But also the rice that they made, they had some sort of seasoning in it that was just really tasty. And I hope I can figure out what it is so I can make it for myself sometime.
Anything for you, Jim?
Oh, I eat whatever they put out there. So
I know a highlight for me this time was in the first camp that we were. Typically, we pack our lunches and bring our PB&J in so that we are not taking away from any of the limited food that the people have in the camps the days that we are there. But in Pagarinia, where we were, the church had prepared food for us as well. And at first, we were going to decline because we didn't want to take away from what they had. But the pastor assured us that in Africa we eat together, and it was important to them to share their food with us. And so we were able to eat the meal that they had prepared. Can you tell us a little bit about what was on the menu, Jim?
Well, they always have beans. Mm-hmm. So the beans were, and like you said, it's how they prepare them. I don't know, and how they cook them, but it tastes so tasty. Mm-hmm. And then porsche, which is like a corn maize, corn flour maize. That was a little bit different tasting.
You got to think cornstarch that turns to the solid form. Yeah. That's a little bit what it's like.
But yeah, it was a little bit, like you said, it's a little different tasting, but it was still good. Mm-hmm. Got to use our fingers, as you said, and have to eat with that style.
Mm-hmm. So. Chapati was another thing that they had on the menu, which was fried. It was fried bread that they would make the dough and then ball it up and throw it, and then they'd roll it flat with like a rolling pin on either a stone or a tree stump, wherever they were sitting around the fire doing their cooking. And then they would drop that into the boiling oil, and it would make this fried bread that was delicious. And greens was the other thing.
No.
At first, I didn't grab the greens off the plate. Very slimy, kind of gooey, difficult to pick up with your fingers. But that's where the portia or the poche comes in, and the chapati to be able to kind of scoop up the things that are a little bit runnier on the plate. And I think I got more laughs than anybody as I sat with the women and ate. But it also was just this neat way of joining with them and their culture and community. I think it meant a lot to them to see us eat with them, even if it was a little bit different than what we were used to. So that was a fun experience.
Yeah, the first day that they shared their food with us, they laughed as they watched us eat with our fingers. And then the next day they had some silverware that we got to use.
I forgot about that. It's true.
And it's funny, it reminds me, our African partners, Duncan and Bosco, they have become accustomed to the American brown bag lunch, and they look forward to having the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches each day. They'll pass up their hot African food to eat our brown bag sandwich. So we do kind of share our cultural foods both ways.
Yeah. So the end of the day, the most refreshing thing to be able to drink. I know we drink lots of water when we're in Uganda because it is hot and humid there. But what would you recommend to order with your meal, Owen? Favorite?
Well, I already know everyone's gonna say Novita, but I actually tried that. It's called like Mirinda fruit. It was kind of like a sweeter Dr. Pepper kind of, but it was very, very tasty. Like you don't realize that you're drinking as much of it as you are, and then you look down and your drink is empty before the food even comes.
I can attest to that.
So Novita, tell us about that. Whose favorite is that one?
That's my favorite.
What's Novita?
It is a pineapple soda. So if you think of like Fanta's orange, this is pineapple. Very, very bubbly though. The funny story with Novita is you can't put your straw in it because the bubbles or the gas in that soda pops like the straw comes up and the soda goes everywhere. But it's very cold and tasty and wonderful after a hot day in the field.
Any favorites that haven't been mentioned yet?
Kind of basic. I just go for the Coke.
Okay. I noticed you ordered crust a few times.
I think I had it once because they ran out of Coke. But yeah, I'm not as venturous with the drinking as I am with the food.
Our driver Bosco, I think, ordered crust a decent amount of time, and he'd said it's a bitter lemon soda, and he said it settles the stomach and is good for the digestion so that he could eat more of his goat. I think he was the one who recommended goat to you, Hudson.
The other one they have there that I don't drink it's Stony. I don't know if any of you guys tried the Stony. It's like a ginger type of drink also, but
Mm-hmm. So lots of work done in the camps and in the community. But I also know you got to enjoy a safari day on the drive back down towards Entebbe. So what was the highlight of the safari day for you, Hudson?
Well, I know most people are going to say the lion, which was cool. But as we were driving back to the main hub place where you like start, because we were actually in a different vehicle and Bosco was not driving us, a safari worker was, and we were in this like different levels of, it's kind of hard to explain. It's like
an open truck.
It's like an open truck, but like stair steps up. But anyway, so we were driving back and all of a sudden we like stop and like throw it in reverse and start like zooming backwards. And I'm like, what? We didn't see anything. So like probably 15 seconds later, we stop and our driver like gets up on the roof and is like looking, and there's a leopard on the side of the road, and we're like, how do we miss that? But it was very cool because most people are always looking for like the main highlights of like lion, elephant,
giraffes.
Yeah, giraffes and stuff like that, but no one really talked about like leopards, so I was like, that's cool.
I can say since we didn't go under, that was the first time we've seen a leopard. That was pretty cool.
It's amazing how camouflaged all of the different animals are in their natural habitat. The driver had said he spotted it was laying on the side of the road sunning itself, and none of us even noticed it as we drove by. And thankfully, he reversed us fast enough that it hadn't wandered too far away, and we were still able to spot it.
Yeah, we were all a little distressed when we figured out that Bosco wasn't going to be our safari driver, but the one we had, he had some good eyes. He saw a leopard, and then even more impressive to me, I think, was that he stopped out of the blue once and like pointed down at the road and said, "Dung beetle." And as he looked closely, you could see a dung beetle just rolling across the road. And I was like, how on earth did he see that? But
Yeah. So you mentioned the lion, Hudson. Who wants to tell the story of the lion? You thought everybody was going to tell that one. Do you want to tell us more about that?
Sure. So we are driving along. It's like kind of middle of the time we were going through the park, and we see these like other vehicles, and they're all like going down this trail, and one of them comes back, and we're looking at them, and they're all like thumbs down, like looking disappointed, and they're like, "Don't go over there." And then all of a sudden they like turn around and go back, and when they come back our way, they like are like looking like excited and like yeah, thumbs up. And then we go down this like little pathway that we're not actually supposed to go down, but
Tall grasses, yeah.
But yeah, so we go down there, and there's a lion right there, and he's just like walking along, and we're all like circling it, like probably 20 feet away. Do you think?
I think it's closer to
I
that.
think we're close.
Yeah, I was like,
I think within 5 feet.
glad I'm on the top row of this vehicle here.
Self-preservation.
The vehicle without sides.
Yeah.
yeah, seriously.
But it was just like
I think
walking
Jim would
along.
have petted it if you wanted to.
It like laid down in the grass, just chill. Pretty sure it's used to vehicles, but
Yeah. Pretty magnificent to see a creature like that out, not in a zoo, in its natural habitat.
yeah.
I loved that while we were on our safari day, the just God's kindness in giving us some of the desires of our heart. Even I know the last day that we were headed through part of the safari park on our drive, Jim had said something about, "Bosco, show us a herd of elephants today. We want to see some baby elephants." And I said, "Well, I want a herd of giraffes. I want to see baby giraffes." And in our little drive through, we saw both of those things. So it was just so cool to see how God kind of in the broad space of all of this land for these animals to roam and range, that he allowed us to see up close the things that we were most excited about too. Nobody mentioned the boat ride. We also got to do a boat ride on part of the Nile. So Sandy, what are some animal highlights from that part?
Well, the animal highlights, it is a highlight now, but I will say the first time I did that, I was not real sure because we're not in like huge boats. Like it's maybe holds 15 people, and there are huge hippos in
I think it's
tons.
like 10.
Yeah, like there's not just one or two. There's like, I don't know what you call herd hippos, and they're everywhere. And like pod. Okay. And like we're in this little boat and they're just all there. And then you see, I don't always get these mixed up. I think alligators are in Africa, right? Crocodiles.
Nile crocodile.
Crocodiles, yeah. And getting a little too close to those for my liking. I'm like, and you can see them, like they get up and it's like, I don't want that boat there. So it was fun to see in some ways. We saw elephants and, you know, like you're really close, you're in a boat and they're right there. Tons of beautiful birds. And then we take that beautiful boat ride and then we get up to Murchison Falls and get to see that beautiful falls, which I should know more about the details of it, but I believe it's not the tallest falls, but it has the most volume and force of water of any fall that goes through. And it is just, you can't even get close enough to it. You have to stop short of it because of the current of the water. But it's just magnificent to just see this falls and this volume of water that continues to come down. So it's a beautiful way to end a trip of church planning and hearing people's struggles and hard stories and things that they endure, and be reminded of the greatness and the magnificent of God as our creator, and how all these things are held together and survive throughout all this time. And So it's just the contrast of the both, to me, just is really a wonderful experience.
Well, and even in some of the playtime, we're able to see scripture come alive in new ways too. Hudson, I know you had said that being on the Nile River and seeing the papyrus growing on the side of the river was kind of a cool thing. Like, what was the insight that gave you into stories of scripture?
Main thing that came to mind was Moses, obviously, with the basket woven of papyrus. I don't know how they made a basket out of like a leaf, but they did. So, yep. Also, how did Moses not get eaten by a crocodile? We won't know. That was very cool, and it was very interesting to just see how things I'd like read about or seen on like TV or something were just like there, and just like it's not just a fairy tale that's been made up. It actually happened. So. Yep.
So I'm curious, some ways that you were different or changed as a result of going on the trip, or maybe a part of scripture that came alive to you in a different way because of an experience that you had. I know for me, the book of Acts, I read that in a different way after being in a part of the world that doesn't have all of some of the technology and connections that we have with. Sandy had mentioned that in the camps, it's a lot of just walking down dirt roads where there's huts on different sides and people are working the land to be able to come up with food to eat for that day to meet their needs. And even drawing water is a whole process and effort. So it was kind of cool felt like in a little bit of a way we were stepping back into the book of Acts of getting to walk down the roads and share the message of the gospel just with those that we encountered and those we meet. And so I know that part of scripture, I kind of picture some of those roads in Uganda, even though it's a different part of the world than some of those missionary journeys were in the book of Acts. But I know that's a part of scripture that feels different to me as I look back. Anything stand out for anyone else?
For me, I shared, the team knows this story, but in the one camp I had my own modern day Book of Ruth. And I had a widow, a woman who's probably about 60, and she had two daughter-in-laws all living in the same little compound with her, who are both widows also, so they've all lost their husbands to the war in South Sudan and are now refugees in a camp. And there's grandchildren and everything around, neighbors, etc. But shared the gospel the first day we were there, and nobody was interested. And then the second day, the mom, whose name was Esther, the older woman, Esther, she accepted the Lord. And so she became then my Naomi. And she had these daughter-in-laws who didn't know the Lord. And they never did come to know the Lord while I was there. They continued to do the Bible stories with me. And it was, interestingly enough, they wanted to be trained to share the gospel, but they weren't quite ready. But it was able to share that real story of God's word with them, that now Esther is like Naomi. She's this mother-in-law of these two widowed daughter-in-laws, and her job is to make the one true God, her Savior, now known to her daughter-in-laws. And so, just being able to share that story of the Bible with these women and just see it, like, you think of the Old Testament, it's like, oh, that's old stuff and it's not pertinent to today and things, but just to see how God orchestrated that and gave me the opportunity. And I've always loved the Book of Ruth, but to actually experience it in the real in today's time was just such a sweet gift.
Thanks for sharing that.
For me, you mentioned earlier Uganda's language is English, but we're working with South Sudanese. And so if you remember in the camps, we had to find people that would speak English, but there were so many other languages that were being spoken. And to me, every time I go to Uganda, I'm in the camps, Revelation 7 is always there, right? Because we're worshiping and they're singing. And some of their songs, they'll move into English because they've heard the songs in English, but they're singing in 3 or 4 different languages at the same time. And when I'm there, a lot of times I just close my eyes and I'm just in that moment and just thanking God that He's allowing us to hear that worship and giving me a glimpse of Revelation 7 on this side of what we're going to be at some point.
Yeah.
And so that's, to me, is just the amazing part.
There's something really special about their worship.
Yeah.
Lifting their praise just with their voices before the Lord.
Without all the, not saying that music, the drums and the guitar and all that's bad, but when they didn't have that, but they're still using their voices to bring it about.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing I learned in Uganda, and I believe it's in other African, their culture is you worship with your entire being. It's not just your voice. So you worship with your body and your hands, and you interact in your worship with other believers. So you don't just stand still and even clap your hands by yourself. You're worshiping with your whole body, with your other believers, and praising the Lord. And that for me is a cultural thing that just every time I see it, I'm moved. It's like we are missing true worship with our brothers and sisters here in this country because we're so isolated that we're just not experiencing the depth of worshiping our awesome God because we're so hung up on what we look like.
Hudson and Sandy, I think you had an experience that caught you a little off guard that you had to make sense of during worship in one of the camps. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened with that song?
So, I was standing off to the side, and all of a sudden they start singing this song about like going to the promised land, and all of a sudden everybody in the room picks up a chair and puts it on their head, and I took the opportunity to stand off onto the stage and video this so that I could have it recorded. So I did not take part in the chair on the head walking around the church, but Sandy over here, at first, when they started doing it, she like looked around for a chair. She couldn't find one. So she finally finds one. And then the next time they do it, she's just like walking around with all of them, holding hands with a little boy who's like, they're all leading a train around the church. It's just a really fun experience.
The video is pretty funny. It's
here
a shame
at
this
UBC.
is a podcast without a video. But
Yeah.
Well, I noticed how quick you pushed that off on them too. I remember like you were in the middle of a circle for a long time on a dance also.
I'm telling you, they pull you out and jump up and down, like kind of shaking hands with you and typically spinning in circles while all that's happening. I think I was getting pretty motion sick during one of the worship sessions we had. I think it lasted a good 20 minutes. They were dripping with sweat. And if they're dripping with sweat, that just means we're soaked in sweat because it's hot in those church areas where we gather. But yeah, just such a sweet time. They don't seem to be fazed by it. And I know some other stories as well. Like we would go out into the field each day and be able to share at different houses. And African time looks a little different than our normal time that we have here. So we would always set a time to say, you need to be back here together, like for our regroup at the end of the day by such and such a time. And it needed to be 30 minutes to an hour before the time that you really needed to go because you lose track of time when you're out in the field. But one day we were quite far away and we really relied on our groups that we would go with not to get us lost and to be able to lead our way back because no way I would have been able to find my way back to the church building from where we were. But there was an older woman who was probably in her 60s that was with my group. And I'm like, we're going to be late. We gotta hurry. And so she starts jogging. And I was like, I have to jog too. If she's jogging, she's in her 60s. I got to be able to keep up here. So I start jogging along and get so out of breath. I have to stop and walk. She graciously stops for me and kind of laughs at me a little bit and then picks up and starts jogging again. Like their physical stamina is something else with their work ethic and how hard they work. But any other stories that stand out that you would like our listeners to be able to hear about, to give them a glimpse of what it was like to be in Uganda? Anything come to mind?
In the second camp I was at, it was the second day that we had been going out, and the first step of the process is training the church and the tools that we use so that they can then go out and share the tools with other believers or tell people about Jesus if they're not already a believer. And then once they accept, then you can share the tools with them. And they can just multiply the gospel. So it was the second day, and after you teach the process to somebody, you're supposed to do a Bible store with them, like a discipleship group, where you like ask questions. There's a specific set of questions about what the Bible story was teaching on. And it's the middle of the day. We're going out. We had been going over other stuff in the church, and my translator and the group were walking to this house, and they said, "We need to speak to this man. He's not heard." And I was a little confused. I was like, "No, we need to go do a discipleship group with these people we talked to yesterday, because that's the next step in the process." And they kept refusing, and they were like, "No, we need to go see this man." So I was starting to get a little frustrated. I was like, I don't know what to do here, because they're not really understanding. So eventually, when we got to the man's hut, it got out. My translator said, "No, we already spoke to them. We had a discipleship group last night, and we leave at afternoon, because it's a long drive back to the hotel, and we can't be out after dark, really." So I was very surprised. I was just kind of oh.
Even after a long day of working with us, they went back out after you had left for the day, it sounds like.
Yep.
That's cool. So, any other standout moments?
You had mentioned earlier about the one side I was at with the Mahdi and the Dinkas. And, the Mahdi church wanted to go reach the Dinkas in a camp. And one of the women from the church who went with me is a married woman, young. Her name was Christine. And after being with her, come to find out that her husband is very lost into alcoholism and actually beats her, and she's physically abused, and he's very nasty to her. And she has children, and she was very concerned with how she was going to raise her children. Basically, she's going to be a single mom without them having their dad, etc. And the one woman that we went to, her name was Rebecca, who's a Dinka, really tall woman. She was a single mom. And the one day we got to meet her son, who was about a teenager boy, and I was watching him on how kind he was to his mother and how obedient, and he didn't complain. And at his lunch break from school, she had him taking the sheep to walk them and getting them water and doing all these little chores and around their huts and things. And he went to leave, and she called him back to do something else. And again, he was just so kind, and not the attitude that I would expect of a teen. He actually had a buddy with him. And I'm watching this whole thing transpire. And then this young man goes into his hut. So the teenage boy doesn't sleep in the same hut as his mom. So they have multiple little huts that are very small. And he comes out, and he comes over to me, and he hands me this bracelet that was his. And he gives me his bracelet. His probably only thing that he has besides the clothes on his back. And he gifted me this bracelet. Yes, I'm crying. And I was so touched. But at that moment, it reminded me, and I turned to Christine and I looked at Rebecca, and these two different tribal people who don't get along, these women had bonded so much. And I said to Christine, I said, "You know the Lord, and Rebecca has raised, because she's taught her son that God, his Father, loves him, and has raised her son as a single mom to know and love the Lord." And I said, "You can do the same thing with your children. You're a good Christian mom, and you have an awesome Abba Father in God." And so the women, this Dinka is going to then mentor and disciple this Mahdi woman. And it was supposed to be the other way around. And God just orchestrated that meeting. And it was just, again, another memorable time of how God just works everything perfectly.
Yeah. I know, Hudson, you had mentioned at times there was a little bit of a tension or frustration with the language barriers that we had. And I know that was an obstacle that I experienced with some of the groups that I was out with. In the camps, we often would, in the church, we would ask, who speaks English? Because we were taking people from the church that speak English that can then be our translators as we go out and share these tools and the message of the gospel. And so in each of the places we were, I would get a translator that spoke English, but then the obstacle was that they didn't speak the language that it needed translated into. So, for example, we were with a group of Mahdi people, but my translators spoke Arabic. So somebody within that group that spoke enough Arabic would then translate into Mahdi. So it's a little bit like a game of telephone at times, where you're communicating a message and then it gets translated into another language. language and then it gets translated another time until all of the listeners there have been able to take in that message. And it was just so cool, even though that was an obstacle, to see how the Lord put the right people in each of those places so that every person whose ears not wanted to hear in those places that we stopped share the gospel were able to have it communicated to them in words that they could understand, whether it was Swahili or Madi or Arabic or other languages that were common within the camps, Bari and others. And so it was really neat to see how the Holy Spirit stepped in and communicated that message to keep it moving along the line, not like a game of telephone, but then also how he led us to people that we were able to encourage in a unique way. Sandy, you had mentioned getting a bracelet from one of the individuals that you were able to serve, and I was able to give one away. We had gone to a home of a woman whose husband had left her. And so it had been days since she had food or had been able to eat anything and was just in despair somewhat of how was God real and was he going to care for her. And we were able to share the message of the gospel with her. She had heard it before, but had said that specifically days before she'd been praying that if God was real, that he would send someone to help. And he brought us to her home to be able to share that message. And there was a godly older woman in our group who was able to encourage her, who had walked through some similar difficulties and the loss of a marriage. And so God just orchestrated that to speak to her the things that she needed to keep going and to renew in her heart the message of the gospel. And I would pick a word a year that I would stamp onto a bracelet and wear like on a little washer on my wrist. And so over 3 years ago, the word that I wanted to focus on for the year was steadfast. So that was what was stamped on that bracelet. And as we did Bible study with this woman over the days that we were there, God just laid on my heart, Jen, you've been wearing that for 3 years. You didn't take it off after the year because you still wanted to be reminded of my steadfast character and my steadfast, faithful love. But you laid on my heart that I needed to give that to Scovia. And so I took that bracelet off, asked her if she would be willing to wear that and remind her during times that God, his faithful love for her could be trusted. And so she was at first worried. She said, I don't speak English. What if I forget what this says? And I said, you don't need to remember what it says. You just remember that God loves you and that you can trust him and he will take care of you. And when I look at my wrist and realize that I don't have that bracelet anymore, I'm going to pray for you. And so having something on your wrist for that long, there's probably on a daily basis that I am reminded of Scovia and her children and can lift her up in prayer that the Lord would meet her daily needs. And so it's neat how the Lord knits our hearts together with our brothers and sisters around the world just through those short interactions we're able to have as a team. So I know we haven't been able to tell all of the stories. We've only scratched the surface a little bit. But for our listeners that are thinking, man, I want to be able to experience something like this, what would you tell somebody that's thinking about going on a short-term trip?
Well, I'm going to jump in here. And so we've heard that, the age range we've had on this trip. So one thing I would say for a short-term trip, don't let age be a hindrance, either on the young side or the old side. God uses us all the same way. And we have different talents. We have different abilities that he's giving us to use. But always, when Sandy and I first started going to Africa, we were worried about the age thing. But I think this trip showed me that age is not a barrier. That, God will use any of us for his glory along the way.
I would say, you don't need to have a ton of experience sharing the gospel with people, or you don't need to have tons of Bible verses memorized. All you really need is a heart that's willing to follow God's commands. And when we are doing God's work, he's faithful to work through us.
We had some pretty simple tools that we took with us to be able to share the gospel throughout the trip. What did you learn about those tools during your time, Owen?
Yeah, I definitely kind of I didn't know how impactful those specific tools would work with the churches in Africa. I kind of took for granted the things that we were learning during our training, because I've grown up in the church and I already knew all these things. And I was like, this is so obvious. Why do we need to train them in this? But as we got to the churches and began training them, I saw like how helpful the pictures that had seemed silly to me were for them to understand the gospel or why they needed to share the gospel. And it was really cool to see like how easy they were for the Africans to learn and pick up, and how grateful they were to have simple tools like that. Like hearing the stories of the people walking hours to get this training. And then seeing some of the people that I had trained go into the camps and start training others in the same tools helped me see like these tools are made not just to teach the people while we're there, but to continue training others when we leave.
The message of the gospel is simple, and it's a miracle all at the same time for God to do that, reworking in our heart of giving us life. Anything that you would say, Sandy or Hudson, for people thinking about going on a trip?
I always think of Peter in the boat, and I tell people that you just got to get out of your boat. Being in the comfort zone, you cannot be used as mightily when you're sitting in that comfort zone. But just like when Peter got out of the boat, he was standing on the water because he had his eyes focused on the Lord, and that's why he was able to do what he was doing. And the minute he took his eyes off the Lord is when he started having problems. So when we get out of our boat and we keep our eyes on the Lord, he will take care of everything for us. And as I share with my story, just me being able to travel and do these things, and like Owen said, like sharing the gospel, that's not me. I'm not a pastor. I never took a theology degree. I didn't go to a Christian college. You're just an everyday person, but if you trust the Lord and get out of your comfort zone and just go, he's going to meet you.
I have two things. One is just simply, why not? There are little reasons like, I know fundraising can seem very daunting, but if like God is really wanting you on that trip, he's going to provide, like Sandy said, like he's going to make it happen if he wants it to happen. So why not just seize the opportunity? And secondly, as a wise man named Jim Corbin once said, the one thing we can't do for eternity after Christ comes back is share the gospel, because everyone's already saved. So we might as well take advantage of every opportunity we have to do so now in our limited time on this earth, and just make it so as many people get to be with Christ forever as possible.
And that's something we don't have to wait till next year's trip to Uganda to be able to do.
I was just saying, Hudson's a mature young man.
Well, I know there are plans in the works for a trip in 2026 to Uganda. So if people have had their hearts stirred and are interested in learning more about the trip, you can pay attention on the website and listen for announcements that start to give details about next year's trips, or reach out to Jim or any of us here that were on the trip. We would love to be able to talk to you more about that.
We're still going to do as a go trip possibly as well, right?
Yeah, we're hoping to be able to partner with Cedarville again.
And we do know pretty sure that it will be June.
It will be in June.
It will be in June. So,
well, thanks for taking us on this journey back through the dirt roads and the camps and in your safari trucks and all the places along the way in Uganda. It's been neat to be reminded of the work that God is doing there and is continuing to do. And I hope that you all have been encouraged that are listening as well. Please consider how the Lord might use you to make him known in your home, community, and the world. And we'll see you next time on another episode of Talking Points.